The air in the bridal suite smelled of expensive lilies and desperation. I sat perfectly still as the makeup artist applied a final layer of setting spray, the cool mist hitting my skin like a reality check. Today was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. But in my family, happiness was always a finite resource, and my mother, Eleanor, had spent 30 years making sure she consumed every last drop of it. I looked at my reflection. The ivory silk of my dress was understated, elegant, and cost me 3 years of disciplined saving. I had built my life from the ground up after they kicked me out at 19 for disobedience, which was their code for wanting a career instead of being my mother's personal assistant. I wonder, as you're listening to this, maybe while doing chores or driving home, have you ever felt completely invisible to the people who are supposed to love you most? Like you were just a prop in the background of their much more important movie? The door creaked open. I didn't have to turn around to know it was her. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Oh, Elena," Eleanor sighed, her voice dripping with that manufactured pity she used so well. "The dress is simple, very you. It's a bit of a shame, though. A wedding is a spectacle. People expect to be wowed." I caught her gaze in the mirror. She wasn't looking at me. She was checking her own reflection, smoothing down the front of her outfit. My breath hitched. She was wearing a floor-length beaded gown in a shade of white so pure it made my ivory dress look yellowed and cheap. It wasn't eggshell or champagne. It was bridal. "Mother," I said, my voice steady despite the hammer of my heart against my ribs. "You're wearing white." She let out a soft, airy laugh, the kind she used to charm the neighbors while she was belittling me behind closed doors. "It's eggshell, darling. Don't be so sensitive. Besides, with your complexion, you need someone nearby to bring a bit of light to the photos. You should be thanking me." She stepped closer, reaching out to adjust my veil, but I flinched away. Her eyes narrowed, the mask of the doting mother slipping for just a fraction of a second to reveal the cold, calculating woman underneath. "Don't be difficult today, Elena," she whispered, leaning into my ear. "Remember who paid for your education. Remember who gave you the foundation to even stand here. You owe me this day. You owe me everything." She didn't know that I had been keeping receipts. She didn't know about the folder tucked inside the tuxedo jacket of the security guard standing at the entrance of the ballroom. She thought she was the director of this play, but I had rewritten the ending. "I remember exactly what I owe you, Mother," I replied, a small, calm smile forming on my lips. "And you're going to get every bit of it before the cake is cut." The ceremony was a blur of forced smiles and the heavy weight of Eleanor's presence. As I walked down the aisle, I didn't see the flowers or the flickering candles. I saw her. She had sat herself in the front row, positioned perfectly so that every professional photo of my big moment would feature 2 brides, one young and understated, and one middle-aged and glowing in stolen white lace. She kept dabbing at her dry eyes with a silk handkerchief, playing the role of the overwhelmed mother to perfection. My father, her silent shadow for 30 years, stared at his shoes. He knew better than to interrupt her spotlight. As we moved into the grand ballroom for the reception, the tension followed me like a physical shroud. I could hear the whispers of the extended family. "Did you see Eleanor's dress? It's practically a duplicate of Elena's. Poor Elena. She never could compete with her mother's elegance." I felt Mark, my now husband, squeeze my hand. He knew. He was the only one who saw the bruises on my spirit that didn't leave marks. "Are you ready?" he whispered as we approached the head table. "I've been ready for a decade, Mark," I replied, my voice as cool as the champagne chilling in the buckets. I watched as Eleanor began her rounds. She was gliding from table to table, graciously accepting compliments meant for me. She was telling stories about how she helped me pick my dress, how she guided my career when I was struggling, and how she was the one who truly made this day happen. The truth? She hadn't contributed a single cent to this wedding. In fact, She had spent the last 6 months trying to drain the joint account I still shared with my father, an account I had kept open only to ensure my younger sister's tuition was safe. Eleanor didn't see a daughter. She saw a retirement plan that was starting to show too much independence. I signaled to a man standing near the entrance. He wasn't in a tuxedo like the other guests. He wore a sharp charcoal suit with a discreet earpiece. This was Elias. Officially, he was event security. Unofficially, he was a licensed process server with a very specific set of instructions. I watched Eleanor approach the head table, her white train sweeping the floor with an arrogance that made my teeth ache. She leaned over to kiss my cheek, the scent of her expensive perfume cloying and suffocating. "Such a lovely party, Elena," she purred, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "I'm so glad I could make it look this sophisticated for you. People are already saying it's the event of the season. You're welcome." I looked her dead in the eye, my expression unreadable. "It's certainly going to be a night to remember, Mother. I've arranged a special gift for you. Think of it as a thank you for everything you've done to get me to this point." Her eyes lit up with greed. She loved gifts, especially public ones that validated her status. "Oh? A public tribute? You finally learned some gratitude." "In a manner of speaking," I said. I looked over her shoulder and nodded to Elias. He began to weave through the tables, a thick manila envelope tucked under his arm. Eleanor smoothed her white silk skirt, her chin tilted up as if she were preparing for a standing ovation. She truly believed I was about to give a speech honoring her sacrifices. Around us, the clinking of silverware slowed as guests noticed Elias approaching. He didn't look like the help. He looked like an omen. "You always were a bit dramatic, Elena," she whispered, her eyes tracking Elias with a hungry curiosity. "But I suppose a daughter should publicly acknowledge the woman who made her." I didn't blink. "Oh, I'm acknowledging everything, Mother. Every single transaction." The hidden factor, the thing Eleanor hadn't realized, was that I hadn't just been building a career. I had been auditing her. For years, she had used my father's terminal passivity to treat my inheritance from my grandmother as her personal slush fund. She thought I was too simple to notice the missing thousands, the loans she took out in my name while I was still in college, and the fact that the very house she lived in, the one she constantly threatened to lock me out of, was technically held in a trust that matured on my wedding day. Elias stopped exactly 2 feet from her. The room went quiet. Even the band trailed off into an awkward silence. "Eleanor Vance?" Elias asked, his voice professional and devoid of emotion. "Yes," she said, her voice lilting with a fake regal confusion. "Can I help you? We're in the middle of a private celebration." "I have a delivery for you," Elias said. He didn't hand her a bouquet or a trophy. He pulled the thick, heavy manila envelope from under his arm. Eleanor's smile faltered. She looked at the envelope, then at me, then back at the envelope. Her fingers, manicured to a lethal point, twitched. "What is this?" "Elena, what is this nonsense?" "It's the gratitude we talked about," I said, my voice projecting clearly to the surrounding tables. "Since you've spent so much time telling everyone how you provided the foundation for my life, I thought it was time we settled the foundation of yours." She snatched the envelope, her face flushing a deep, angry crimson that clashed horribly with her white dress. She ripped it open, her eyes darting over the first page. I watched the blood drain from her cheeks. It wasn't a poem. It wasn't a thank you note. It was a formal eviction notice for the estate on Willow Creek, accompanied by a lawsuit for the recovery of misappropriated funds totaling 6 figures. You can't do this," she hissed, her voice cracking. "This is my home. I am your mother." "The trust matured this morning at 9:40 a.m., I replied, leaning back in my chair, feeling the weight of 30 years finally lift. "The house is mine. And since you've made it clear that you consider yourself a guest of honor who deserves the spotlight, I've decided you can find a new stage. One you actually pay for." The security guard stepped closer. He wasn't there to keep the peace. He was there to ensure the exit. The silence in the ballroom was absolute, broken only by the sharp, rhythmic rustle of Eleanor's hands shaking as she turned the pages. Every guest, the cousins she'd manipulated, the neighbors she'd lied to, was leaning in, their eyes darting between her white dress and the legal documents in her trembling hands. "This is a mistake," Eleanor gasped, her voice shrill, the regal mask finally shattering. "You forged this. You're trying to humiliate me. On your wedding day? How dare you be so cruel?" I stood up slowly, the silk of my dress whispering against the chair. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The calm in my chest was the most powerful weapon I had ever wielded. "Cruelty, Mother, is wearing white to your daughter's wedding to remind her she'll never be the lead in her own life," I said, my voice carrying to the very back of the hall. "Cruelty is draining your child's inheritance while telling her she's a burden. What you're holding isn't cruelty. It's an invoice." I turned to the crowd, seeing my father's face. For the first time in my life, he didn't look away. He looked relieved. He had signed the final affidavit 2 weeks ago, finally choosing his daughter over his wife's tyranny. "For those of you wondering," I continued, addressing the room, "my mother has spent the last decade explaining how she supported me. The documents she's holding prove that she's been living in a house I own, spending money she stole from my grandmother's legacy, all while treating me like an ungrateful tenant. Today, the lease on her lies has officially expired." Eleanor's face contorted. She looked down at her white beaded gown, the dress she thought would symbolize her dominance, and suddenly, it looked like a shroud. She looked at Elias, who stood like a stone statue beside her. "You have 30 days to vacate the property, Eleanor," Elias said, his voice a low rumble. "And the freeze on the misappropriated accounts is effective immediately. You'll find the contact information for Ms. Vance's attorneys on the final page." "You can't do this to me!" she shrieked, her voice cracking into a jagged edge. "I am the reason you are anything. I am the center of this family." "No, Mother," I said, leaning in close so only she could see the cold fire in my eyes. "You were the storm. I'm the one who built the shelter. And you're no longer invited inside." I nodded to Elias. It was time for the guest of honor to make her exit. The doors of the ballroom swung shut behind Eleanor, the heavy oak muffling her final shrill protests. For a moment, the room was suspended in a vacuum of shocked silence. Then, slowly, the murmur of the crowd began to rise, not with mockery, but with a collective exhale. The shadow that had loomed over my life for 3 decades had finally been chased out by the light. I sat back down, my hand finding marks under the table. He squeezed it tight, a silent promise that the battle was over. I looked at my father. He gave me a small, sad nod of pride before quietly exiting to follow the process server. He wasn't going back to Eleanor. He was going to his brother's house to start his own life. The rest of the night wasn't a spectacle like Eleanor wanted. It was something much better. It was honest. We danced, we laughed, and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was performing for a judge who would never give me a passing grade. The silent revenge wasn't just the eviction or the lawsuit, it was the peace that followed. It was the realization that her power over me only existed as long as I agreed to play my part in her script. When I tore up that script, she didn't have a role left to play. As I look back on that day, I realize that setting boundaries isn't an act of war. It's an act of self-preservation. Walking away from a toxic person, even if they share your DNA, isn't a betrayal. It's a homecoming to yourself. I reclaimed my name, my home, and my future in one single quiet evening. I hope my story reminds you that you don't have to be a supporting character in someone else's drama. You have the right to own your life, your successes, and your joy. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and share it with someone who might need the courage to stand up for themselves today. Have you ever had to deal with a family member trying to steal your spotlight or your future? Comment your stories below. I read every single one, and our community is here to support you. Don't forget to subscribe to Silent Revenge Lab for more stories of justice, strength, and the ultimate vindication. Until next time, stay strong, stay silent, and let your success be your noise.